Hello and welcome back from Top of the Wall. My name is Mason Knopp, and welcome back to a study on Pauper Helix combo. Pauper Helix combo is a combo deck that is usually within the Is It color combination, sometimes splashing for another color like Jeskai, maybe Temur, sometimes Grixis, this or that, but always largely in blue and red together. And before I actually start digging into the deck, I want to properly define what a combo is, what value is, and what synergy is. I want to define what these are. Value is the net measurable effect that any given card or piece has on a game, whether it is over a period of time or immediately upon playing that or having it become present in the game as part of the game. Synergy is the net total value between cards or pieces within the game while they are both present and part of the game, having an effect on it at the same time. A combo is a synergy with a net total value greater than the net total value of the individual cards and or pieces within a game at the time. So with that being said, I'd like everyone to keep that in mind while I'm going through this deck and try to understand that when I'm talking about synergy, I am trying to talk about something other than the combo. I'm trying to talk about something that is outside of the combo, not necessarily the thing that we are trying to win with, which is the Helix and the zero drops and the untappers and the win condition, but simply before that and maybe trying to recover after that. So here we are at our glorious testing deck. Good old Singleton. We have a bunch of different zero-drop artifacts and some that are higher in mana cost but are still useful that I thought were kind of worth checking out, because if you bounce some of these cards and then replay them, you can get value that way by either drawing a card, gaining life, or scrying. And I just wanted to try some different things around, see other uses for Banishing Knack, other synergies, see if there was perhaps different uses for a lot of these cards and different win conditions too, like Astral Steel. These storm cards, they are basically uncounterable in Pauper because the storm trigger goes off when you cast it. I don't believe there's any way to counter triggered abilities or activated abilities in Pauper at the moment, so basically uncounterable. You have to counter each one of the storm cards. There's also Weather the Storm, which is another way to win the game, is infinite life, because at that point your opponent, if they have a deck that is smaller than yours, like they have less cards in it, they will eventually draw out and die. Plus in Pauper there isn't there's only two win conditions, which is either mill or damage. Then we have all of our untappers and a way to get our zero cost artifact. So Zephyr Scribe is the most powerful one that I found in testing because of its ability to loot and his ability to synergize with so many different spells to untap. It's not just artifacts like with Mirror and Spy, although he does have a weak body. All of these zero-drop creatures too, like Ornithopter and Phyrexian Walker. There were some Kobolds, but I didn't really like the Kobolds very much. I didn't like them. Nettle Drone is an alternate win condition as well as an untapper, which I thought was neat. Definitely better than Mirror and Spy if you're going just for the combo. The Midnight Guard untaps with all of the creatures, so the opposite of Zephyr Scribe, and he doesn't help you loot. But he is a very powerful way to win the game if you're focusing on getting the creature artifacts out, the zero cost creatures, and then using the Retraction Helix or the Banishing Knack to bounce them. And he combos with Presence of Gone, which is sweet. Elusive Spellfist, another alternate way to win. There's a bunch of creatures that get +1/+0 whenever you do something in the game of Magic. So there's a bunch of things like this, but unfortunately there's fogs in the game, and there's good blockers, and there's Stonehorn Dignitary, which makes people skip their combat step. So really, they can find a lot of ways around this. Plus, a lot of them don't have that much toughness. They can still all be Doombladed, unfortunately. Batter Golem is like Mirror and Spy, but I think worse. The only upside is that he or she is a whatever it is. It is a artifact, so you get some artifact synergies going with this. The Archetypes Assistant, actually, since we were playing a bunch of 0-drops, I thought it was an amazing idea to put in and try to see what happens when Archetypes Assistant meets a bunch of 0-drops, how many scries you can get. This is pretty much it. There are a few other alternative cards in here in this little extra area, like alternate win conditions like Golem Foundry. Golem Foundry is another way to win, making infinite 3/3s, but it's not as fast as the Storm of Astral Steel or Weather the Storm. When you're comboing off, the difference a turn can make can be absolutely massive. And we also have a bunch of protection spells and counter spells and ways to interact with our opponent's removal and protect our stuff. So what I've noticed with basically every single deck that's built around a combo or even a synergy, there's really two different ways to go about building the deck and utilizing the synergy or the combo. There's either crowding or there is racing. Crowding is when you essentially put a bunch of pieces around the synergy that also synergize with things, so you don't need to be totally reliant on that for the win condition, or to, I guess, remove your opponent from the game. While the racing part is essentially you are trying to race your combo and reduce the number of turns that your opponent has possible to interact with you by just going as fast as possible. Similar to how you can think of burn as essentially taking away as many of your opponent's turns as possible for them to win the game by just lightning bolting them to the face and trying to kill them on turn 3 or 4. So the first variant that I wanted to talk about for this combo is one that I found on MTG Goldfish. MTG Goldfish did a whole, they called it Drazi Pulp because there's an herbal Pulctus that can be used to regenerate a creature, and there is a Nettle Drone in here that can untap when you cast the artifacts. So this is a more straightforward version of the combo and a lot easier to demonstrate. We have our Retraction Helixes and our Banishing Act, which is the same thing. Gives a creature the ability to tap and return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So if we have, let's say, one of these creatures that can be untapped repeatedly, like Batter Golem or the Nettle Drone, and we have a 0 mana cost card, like Herbal Pulctus or Welding Jar, we can use this on the Nettle Drone or the Batter Golem to return a 0-drop to hand, replay the 0-drop, untapping the Golem or the Nettle Drone, and then we are reset, and we can do this as many times as we like. They actually got their list based off of a article made by Gavin Verhey and 2 similar decks made by users that submitted decks to them. So the 2 ways that it tries to win is the Elusive Spell Fist, which can become an unblockable and has the ability to just gain infinite power, or the Nettle Drone to ping them repeatedly. Remember, you're going to need 1 card that untaps that has been targeted with the Banishing Act to return these, while you also need another Nettle Drone. Its ways of finding are Preordain, Ponder. It has some protection like Apostle's Blessing and Dispel, and you can't technically use these to bounce your combo pieces to protect them. Its other win condition, the Golem Foundry, which I mentioned, is interesting in this because it does synergize with the Battered Golem. You can use it to untap the Battered Golem repeatedly. So the Battered Golem can bounce this a couple times, and then after it has a bunch of counters on the Golem Foundry, you start making artifacts with Golem Foundry, and Battered Golem still untaps because they're being played, they're not cast. You can then use it to bounce their entire team, buying you that turn. But I felt this was all a little lackluster. Mana base is a little boring for me. The sideboard is pretty regular for what you would see. Smelled is odd choice though. So of course I went ahead and I made some upgrades to it, because their version of the deck without the upgrades only really had access to the combo about average of like turn 7, it seemed, when I was watching a lot of their games, and had a very bad loss rate, and they were mana screwed a lot of times. Like, they wouldn't actually, sometimes they actually had the combo as early as turn 4, but they didn't have the mana to cast it. They were just defeated by their own mana base a number of games. Fortunately, it didn't flood though. So I wanted to include extra way of fixing, of course, and I wanted to play the game a little bit differently. I upgraded the removal. No more dispels. Instead, they have spell pierce. Spell pierce can hit multiple different forms of removal, not just the instants, and can even target some of their artifacts and whatever, some of their spells. Brainstorm, and as you see with the mana base, they have extra shuffling effect here for the Brainstorm. I got rid of 2 of the Preordains in exchange for more Brainstorms. So now they have an additional cantrip too, and a better one. And as far as the untappers go, we have a Mirren Spy instead of the Battered Golem. The Mirren Spy is actually better for toughness. It's a better blocker. You can play it earlier to help fight through all of the, to help protect yourself against all of the stompy creatures. The Nettle Drones are still there. Of course, like Nettle Drone, I really do. Reckless Fireweaver is actually faster than the Elusive Spellfist because you can play Reckless Fireweaver the turn that you were going off, not the turn before. And you don't actually have to worry about fogs, and you don't have to worry about the Stonehorn Dignitary thing. You can get around all of that. Plus, I have, speaking of speed, I have the Lotus Petals. I still have the Golem Foundry. Still like Golem Foundry. Herbal Poultice. It's not good in multiples because you would have to pay 3 for each one of them to use it. Tormod Script is also just incidentally we have Graveyard Hate, which is fantastic. I love that. Welding Jar to protect our other artifacts, maybe protect Golem Foundry, whatever. And I upgraded the sideboard a little bit with the Flaring Pane to help get through fogs, like specifically the prismatic strands. And I also included a Steel Sabotage instead of the Smelt, since we're actually just trying to essentially go a little bit faster than our opponents can and kill them. And so far, with all these changes, I've made to the deck, it seems like we're about 2 turns faster, 1 to 2 turns faster, it seems, because our mana base is a little bit better, our cantrips are a little bit better, our artifacts now have a better purpose in the game, we can now get through fogs, and we can react to what our opponent is doing better. All around, we're just a little bit stronger in all of the categories. These decks are both good examples of racing decks. All they're focused on is finding their combo, protecting their combo, and reducing the number of turns until they can combo. But of course, we can go faster than turn 5 or 6. Welcome to Pigeon Racing. This is the only version of the deck that I could make or find that was actually able to properly pull off the combo by turn 3. Although that is a little bit more uncommon. It's more typical for us to pull off the combo by turn 4 is typical. The average win is much closer to turn 4, and we do actually have a little bit more removal in this deck and a little bit better removal. So the reason why this deck is called Pigeon Racing is because of this this bird here. Whenever you cast a historic spell, which includes artifacts, you can actually just get to scry one. So when you're casting those 0-drop artifacts infinitely, you're infinitely scrying through the entire deck. And we're using Zephyr's Scribe here because it is the best untapper. It has the ability to loot, so it can find us combo pieces all by itself. Although we would still like an additional Nettle Drone, so that way the average card we're looking at has a definitely higher chance to see an untapper that we can use to win. We also have these 3 Burning Prophets, which are good blockers, and they are also alternate win conditions by getting infinite power and scrying, which is the big thing that we have them for. So we use these scryers mainly to find the Reckless Fireweaver, and then when we find the Reckless Fireweaver on the top of our library, instead of scrying it away, we loot once with the Zephyr Scribe, drawing the Fireweaver, and if we cast then any of our non-creature spells, we get to untap this and continue bouncing artifacts afterwards. We also can use a Lonely Sandbar or one of our cantrips to get the Reckless Fireweaver off the top for us if we wanted, just in case. So it is actually easier to make this thing more reliable on turn 4 than it is to actually make it any faster. I found that this Sandstone Needle is because it can tap for 2 mana. Although it only does it twice, we only really need it to do it twice, and it's perfectly good to just use it all up on turn 4, playing the Reckless Fireweaver and using it once to tap for a Zephyr Scribe or a Nettle Drone or a Burning Prophet, along with the Lotus Petals. I found that rituals were just unnecessary, because we didn't have use for 3 mana all the time. That was just red. Sure, we could use more mana, but it's not really worth it. It thins out the combo in the deck. It thins out the other cards that we need a lot. And there were also issues with it opening us up for a 2-for-1, because if we use the ritual to cast one of our 3-drops, then we ended up getting blown out when they removed the 3-drop that we just ritualed out. We've also removed the majority of the cantrip. Well, we've also removed half of the cantrips, instead just opting for the 4 preordains, and relying mostly on scrying with these and 13 artifacts to help us scry. So usually by turn 4 we can see about a good 15 cards, which is not unusual for us if we don't already have the combo in hand, to just play Bird or play Prophet, and then 0-drop, 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 get to scry 3 times in quick succession, looking for the one thing that we need, making it way faster to find these. So not only do we have the mana to cast them earlier, but we also have the ability to find them faster. And because of these things interaction with the combo themselves, if we have either of these creatures while we're going off, they can find us the Reckless Fireweaver right when we need the combo. We don't need the Fireweaver in hand. And for removal, there's some extra stuff. I put in the Augur Bolas in case there's a particularly really strong aggressive matchup when we just need to buy ourselves 1 extra turn perhaps, and it helps us find either a Banishing Act or any of our cantrips or any of our instants, this or that. It does often hit, plus if we're using the scry to make sure that we have something on top for it to hit, it's even more useful. Just get rid of some elves and tokens with Blazing Valley. The Dispel, I still like Dispel. It is pretty good in the combo matchups. We still have a Golem Foundry. We can actually use the Golem Foundry as a much harder to remove win condition that can still be just slotted in the place of Reckless Fireweaver, but we just get a bunch infinite 3/3s instead, and still untaps the Zephyr Scribe Mage when we cast it. So we don't need a draw spell to get it, or to cast another non-creature spell to untap and continue the combo. We have the Hydro Blast, Power Blast, Scour possibilities for the longer matchups. Now that we've seen the racing side of this combo and what some of those decks look like, let's look at the variations in crowding. This variant is called Trinket by Chance. Overall, this deck feels a lot like a sort of tempo deck, or perhaps a control deck, trying to gain advantage while at the same time trying to keep its opponent 1 or 2 steps behind, and then close out the game like that. We have only the 4 Retraction Helixes in here for the combo. Remember, this combo is more like incidental. We're trying to rather play around how strong these spells are by themselves, and just because they're in the same deck together, might as well sort of combo as just like, well, we might as well if we're already here. It is more so of a deck that tries to grind out your opponents and try to put them in a position where they are less likely to stop you than before. Their removal is a lot of times worn out, and you actually try to get a lot of value out of Trinket Mage to maybe find the one Bone Saw when you need it, when you have the other pieces of the combo and you want to try to go for it. Like maybe you feel like, oh, now is the right time, I should do it, and just win the game out of nowhere. Or if you have the Trinket Mage, just go get Mantle of the Tides, or just try to get like the Pyrite Spell Bomb to maybe shoot down one of their creatures, or a Viridian Longbow if you have the Zephyr Scribe Mage. Because with the Longbow and the Scribe Mage, or like enough mana, you could just pass around the Longbow to your creatures, or just this one untapper, and then cast a couple of spells like a couple of your cantrips, untap, tap it to shoot something, untap, tap it to shoot something, repeatedly just start machine gunning down creatures. The Galvanic Blast is to get rid of creatures, the typical counter spell, Galvanic Blast, Spell Pierce, because we do have a lot of artifacts and some artifact lands. We have like 16 artifacts in here. So it's not that hard for us to get Metalcraft, especially with the Trinket Mage. The Trinket Mage also can be used to fix us, so it can go get a great furnace for us, which is sweet. We got Firebolt. We're not super heavy into artifact theme in this deck, particularly. We're more so just looking to play some of these good, strong creatures that are cheap and powerful to gain advantage and try to close out the game, which is actually pretty easy. Good blockers, unblockable, you know, big power, very efficient. These are better creatures than they are combo win conditions, and right now we are trying to play a longer game and play just all-around stronger deck that is not entirely reliant on one specific combo to win. Really trying to take full advantage of Witching Well, which is a very strong new addition to Pauper. Definitely check out this card. Very good card. Good in the early game, good in the late game. Keep in mind the activated ability is, there's only 2 cards in Pauper that counter activated abilities, so they either have to counter your 1-drop or just let you have it, and then later you get to draw the 2 cards at instant speed, while also holding up counterspell. So if they don't cast anything good, then you just draw the 2 cards. It's fantastic. Or Galvanic Blast, or whatever you like. So we can actually try to win the game just as a regular mid-range deck. And if the game is going longer, it's more and more likely that we'll see Bonesaw and Retraction Helix and a Zephyr Scribe Mage. So longer, we can just try to win out of nowhere. Earlier, we can just close out the game rather fast. These are both just one end of the spectrum versus the other end of the spectrum. There's ways to just be in the middle of it. It is not polarizing. You don't have to pick a side. The further that you travel down to one side of the spectrum, the more of its positives and negatives that you get, while the further you travel down to the other side of the spectrum, the more of its positives and negatives you get. But by staying in the middle, both of them are lessened. There are plenty of combo decks that find themselves in the middle of the spectrum all the time, because let's say that the meta is a certain way and you need to protect yourself and your combo from a specific type of removal spell that is haphazardous to you, and maybe you find that speed isn't the best, or perhaps you find that the meta is in a certain way where you can't be reliant on playing a slower, stronger deck like that's mid-ranged or perhaps controlling. You need the speed, but you might not want all of it. So let's take a look at one of those middle of the spectrum decks. So as you can see, we're kind of in the middle in this deck. This one is an artifact variant of the deck. We're playing the artifact lands to help with Metalcraft. We do have alternate win condition with Gear Seeker Servant, and we are sort of playing off the idea of artifacts. So we do have some 0-drops that are tutorable with the Trinket Mage, and we're really looking to get a lot of value off of Witching Well, not Wishing Well, Witching Well, and Prophetic Prism to both fix us and to draw us another card, thinning our deck. We have the Battered Golem because it's also an artifact and it plays around artifact themes, and we still keep the Burning Prophet as sort of an extra win condition / value card to help us find our Golem Foundry. We are keeping the Zephyr Scribes because the Zephyr Scribes are just really strong, and it actually uses the full 4 Banishing Axe and 4 Retraction Helixes, and tries to bounce Witching Well repeatedly, and uses a Battered Golem and Witching Well to just go through real quick and scry it through a lot of your deck. Of course, there's a bunch of different ways to be in the spectrum. Like, there's maybe a more creature-heavy variant, and it uses Mirren Spy and Battered Golem, and uses all the 0-drop creatures like Ornithopter, and doesn't use Zephyr Scribe. And Metalcraft's actually really easy for us to get. So Galvanic Blast is also an option in here. This is just something that I kind of threw together just to like show there is a lot of room for potential, and this is really quick, just a quick little bonus variant. I was exploring the Midnight Gond combo with Midnight Guard and Presence of Gond, because Presence of Gond taps, make a 1/1, while Midnight Guard does untap whenever you make whenever another creature enters the battlefield. So you can repeatedly just make infinite 1/1s. Keep in mind that there are other decks that use the Midnight Gond combo and also use Sprout Swarm. I wanted to kind of combine this and also put a Helix combo package into the deck as well. We're only playing the four Helixes and 1 Banishing Knack. We have 11 of these 0-drop creatures, and we have 2 Nettle Drones as ways to win with the Banishing Knack combo. There's this odd synergy that happens when you also have the Sprout Swarm and the Banishing Knack going off in these 0-drops. When you cast Sprout Swarm and you're paying part of its evoke cost with creatures like Midnight Guard, it makes a 1/1 which untaps Midnight Guard. But if you also have all these 0-drops and a Banishing Knack or a Retraction Helix, preferably the Traction Helix, it has a way better art. The Midnight Guard can have Retraction Helix target it. Retraction Helix is now giving it the ability to tap to return target permanent, non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So what you can do is you can cast Sprout Swarm, tap down 1, 2, a 3, and a 4 creatures, and pay 1 green mana, and then make the 1/1. Now, when the 1/1 enters, it'll untap the Midnight Guard, which has Banishing Knack on it. Then the guard taps, returns a Walker to the hand, returns an Ornithopter to the hand, or returns Sphere to the hand. You replay it for 0, it's now untapped. And Midnight Guard also untaps and allows you to do it to the other ones. So as long as you have a Midnight Guard on the battlefield, a Retraction Helix, and a Sprout Swarm, and these 0-drops, at least 3 of them, you can infinitely make 1/1s with Sprout Swarm. Pretty sweet, and I built an entire deck around it. I wanted to include Impulse because a lot of times Impulse does dig deeper than most cantrips, and is instant speed, so you also can hold up other things like your Fogs, or you can hold up other cantrips perhaps, or you can hold up your Apostle's Blessing, or you can hold up Banishing Knack, Traction Helix to try to return something to hand, Spell Pierce, whatever have you. I also got a little Spring Lake Jump for some additional fixing, along with Survivor's Encampment. Because we have so many 0-drops, a lot of times turn 1 Survivor's Encampment just taps for any 1 color of mana. There is a certain importance in redundancy, of course. By having extra pieces of your combo, you're more likely to find it, the probability increases, but it's also important to understand that there are other ways to get redundancy in your deck without necessarily having 16 pieces of one part of the combo and another 16 pieces of the other part of the combo. And there's other ways to find redundancy besides actually including extra physical copies of a particular combo piece. There can be alternate win conditions, there could be cantrips, there can be tutors, there can be recursion, and I wanted to go over some of the recursion right now. Recursion is a lot like tutoring. It essentially allows you to look through a bunch of cards. Instead of your deck, it's your graveyard, and you choose whatever is the best one for that situation, and it is a tax on whatever the best card is available. Like if you're playing a Demonic Tutor, it represents whatever the very best card in your deck is, plus 1 and a black. But if you're playing Pulse of Marasa, it is the best creature or land card in your graveyard for the situation, plus 1 green mana and 2 mana as a little tax. And you do gain the 6 life, which is not half bad. That's nothing to shrug at. It's actually worth noting because of how popular Burn is right now. This deck in particular is more so made to show that it is possible to recur pretty much every piece of the combo. We also have Lean and Square. It also has the ability to return a 0-drop or a 1-drop from our graveyard to our hand. That's an artifact. And there's Scribe of the Mindful that can get our Helix back or our Knacks back. I included the Dredgers just so that way I could get my graveyard very full very fast, just so I could get more chances to use more things. Unearth can get back any of the creatures for the combo. And if we do have a heavy artifact theme going, Resourceful Return is actually a pretty good card. It's just a 2-mana 2-for-1. Get whatever the best creature card in our graveyard is back to our hand and draw a card. These are just some of the different recursion cards that I wanted to try. This is if you want to play this deck, you shouldn't, but you can. I don't recommend it ever, but go for it. It will do what makes you happy. You know, it didn't really click with me how good Unearth was until I realized, oh wait, there's a Stinkweed Imp in my graveyard, and I have 2 mana up at the end of my opponent's turn. What if I cycle Unearth to dredge again with the Stinkweed Imp. Keep it in mind that there always are more ways to recur cards, and there are definitely more down here, I believe. I also wanted to talk about another kind of racing deck. A term used to describe these decks is fearless. These fearless decks are essentially decks that are trying to race towards their combo as fast as possible, and they're doing it by cutting removal from the deck. They're cutting their protection spells. They're cutting pretty much all of their ways of interacting. And they're just trying to, at as many of their combo pieces as possible typically, have the greatest amount of consistency possible, and having their combo ready as soon as possible. It is absolutely pinnacle of racing. These fearless decks can pop up in any format where combo decks are present. They try to thin their deck as much as possible. A lot of times Metamorphose is used, Street Wraith is used, Gitaxian Probe is used. Not legal in Pauper right now, so no Gitaxian Probe. They also try to do things like they have to have extra combo pieces, and try to play extra cards that will count as virtual extra copies. So in this one in particular, I just modified it from the Pigeon Racing deck from earlier in the video, because it was already pretty fast, and this does actually get a little bit faster and cut the removal. So what ends up happening is we actually have a significantly better game one, like all fearless decks do. By cutting all that removal and all that interaction in the first game, you're actually able to overpower your opponent extremely fast with your consistency typically. But in the second game of the match, you end up finding that, oh, your opponent has a real sideboard that can interact with your deck, and sometimes they get those sideboard pieces and they blow you out of game 2 and 3. They're not off guard anymore. They know what to expect, and they know what to remove. They're more prepared, and their deck is now skewed to fight yours a little bit better. So there is a lot of ups and downs with the fearless decks. Like if you're a fearless deck and your opponent is playing a deck that is perhaps faster than yours, fearless is definitely not going to do you any favors. It's part of the reason why they're so infrequent and you don't see them a lot of time, and why almost every deck in every format has some kind of interaction, no matter what kind of strategy that they're playing. They always have a couple of removal spells hanging around. We spent all this time talking about creatures with tap abilities, yet we haven't talked about the haste outlets. Haste outlets are cards that give our creatures the ability to not be affected by summoning sickness. They're able to use their tap abilities sooner. They're able to attack one turn earlier. And this whole just being able to do something one turn earlier, as I've just talked about with speed and being fearless, is a real advantage. It's one turn less that they have to find removal, to have the mana to play the removal. It can save us a whole turn. It lets us win a turn earlier, which is very important. But I don't like haste outlets. Their value is entirely dependent on the presence of a creature that needs haste, that hasn't already been on the battlefield for a turn. So there's a rather slim window for you to actually use the haste outlet. And each haste outlet usually costs a card and some mana. So if you want to have that creature out and still have the mana during that narrow window to play that creature, that means that you're going to need more mana at that time. You're going to need additional cards at that time. And this window is looking even slimmer and slimmer. If you end up putting too many haste outlets in your deck and you end up with multiples of them in your hand at the same time, then if you don't have enough creatures or enough mana for each haste outlet to have value, then your haste outlets are basically worthless. They're not even a real option, so they're not even a real card at that point. And because they cost mana and that card occasionally do have it in hand, but you only have the mana to actually play the creature that you wanted, you would end up waiting a turn to play the Nettle Drone next turn, and then play the haste outlet onto the Nettle Drone or the Zephyr Scribe or whatever tap creature you're going to end up using 2 cards on that one, opening yourself up for a 2-for-1. It's pretty rough because you're already opening yourself up for a 2-for-1 with the Helix to begin with, because you're targeting with the Helix too. So it's a 3-for-1 if they have any removal. I know last video, Nichols F was asking about a conclusion in the comments, and I didn't really feel like the videos needed a conclusion because it was more of just a sort of podcast, a kind of discussion about the topic and sort of a delving into the subject matter rather than a complete guide to it or some kind of scientific study or something like that. But I do feel that now conclusion may be more appropriate. Some things to take away from this. I suppose that the biggest takeaway to take from this entire video is that all combo decks can be put on a scale. One side of the scale is racing and the other side of the scale is crowding. The racing side of the scale, the closer that you are to racing, the more reliant that you are on a specific combo, the more that you are trying to either protect the combo or speed up the combo. You're always counting down towards the combo. While if you are a crowding deck, your combo is more so incidental. Your combo pieces are chosen and are selected there and put in those specific amounts for their ability to act independently of one another. You care more about the fact that they are strong without the other pieces of the combo rather than their potential to combo. There unfortunately wasn't enough time in this video to discuss the meta, but I'd like to just quickly touch down on it and give you just a little bit more to take away. As far as the meta is concerned, the meta starts to drift one way or another. Your combo may be effective, and a lot of decks become affected, and they have to change the way that they play. They have to sometimes change the amounts of certain cards that they see, or they have to just completely remove cards because they're just incredibly unfavorable to have. So for this combo, as the format drifts closer and closer towards early game removal, cheaper removal, earlier interactions, the cards like Foil and Disfigure, you may end up wanting to play a more crowding style deck. So that way you're not entirely reliant on it. Your combo is, even though it's very easy to interact with, is not necessarily going to be as easy because during that grindier game, you're going to be having synergies that they will all start to fight through. It will not be the only thing that they are saving their counterspells for. While if the format moves towards synergistic games where people are trying to grind each other out over a longer period of time, then a lot of times racing them down is actually the best option, because just outpacing them before they get the chance to do anything, knowing that they don't have a lot of interactions, is actually a way better alternative to actually trying to grind them out. And speaking of grindiness, don't forget about Recursion. Recursion over a longer game gets better and better. It starts to resemble a tutor more and more as the card selection that you can choose from in your graveyard becomes bigger and bigger, and as your mana base develops and you get more and more mana, that tax becomes much smaller proportionally compared to the size of your mana base. And before I sign off, I just want to remind everyone that this is just my opinion on how best to play competitive Magic. If you're a more casual player, then technically advice that pertains to competitive games doesn't really apply to a casual game. Technically, if you're playing casually, then your win condition is having fun. It is not comboing off and killing your opponent. Your win condition is just, did you enjoy yourself? Did you enjoy yourself with your friends? And that's the important part. And if you are still watching and if you are still enjoying this video, then I would like to remind you that this is the season of giving. And if you have the chance and you have a little bit of extra money left over in your gift giving budget, you should go to Oxfam. They use the money to help end world poverty, doing things like empowering community leaders, solving problems like clean water, food, disaster relief, all kinds of problems. And right now they are doing a gift matching thing. So if you do donate money, they end up matching it any amount up to a couple $1 million. So now is the time to donate.